In the last video, we talked about the difference between simple and complex carbohydrates. We determined that these categories do not make carbohydrates good or bad. In this video, we'll reveal what does make carbohydrates good or bad choices. With the simple carbohydrates, we talked about how they're good and bad choices. We had fruits, table sugar, and milk. These have varying levels of health in the body. So how do we know which ones are good or bad? The general rule that we use for the simple carbohydrates is to choose foods with natural sugars and avoid foods with added sugars. Now, we might have a different idea about what is considered natural or added. Natural does not necessarily mean that it comes from a plant or the ground. It does not even have to do with how much processing has been done. With those definitions, table sugar would be natural. And research shows when we add table sugar to foods, we tend to consume too much. Natural sugars are foods that have sugar naturally in them, like fruits and milk. Added sugars, on the other hand, are foods that have sugar added to them. The sugar could be part of the processing, cooking, maybe as part of the recipe, or what you add to foods before you eat it. Table sugar, honey, agave, and other sweeteners are not really consumed by themselves. They're always added to foods to add some sweetness. So when you eat a food with honey added, it's an added sugar. Even though honey and agave sound natural, they are always added to foods, which means you are likely to consume too much of them, and now they become added sugars. But it gets tricky because foods like milk and yogurt that have natural sources of sugar can also have additional sugar added to them to make them taste sweeter. The good news is that manufacturers have to include the added sugars on their labels. A good example is the difference between plain milk and chocolate milk. Notice in the plain milk that it has 12 grams of sugar, but none of these are added sugars. They are all natural, the lactose we talked about before. However, in the chocolate milk, there are 22 grams of sugar, with 11 of those being added sugars. They add the chocolate syrup, which contains 11 grams of sugar, to the chocolate milk. Now let's switch gears to the complex carbohydrates and determine good and bad choices there. We learned about the starch in grains and legumes and fiber in whole grains, fruits, and vegetables and legumes. We said that the starch is very large and takes longer to break down, so it has less effect on blood sugars. The reason we talked about this is because spiking your blood sugars can lead to obesity and other chronic diseases. However, the main reason starches are good is because they have fiber along with them. Notice that I mentioned fiber in all of those food groups. Unfortunately, when they process our foods, they remove the fiber. And researchers believe this is one of the main reasons for weight gain and high blood sugars. The processing technique is called refining. The manufacturers remove the fiber, protein, vitamins, and minerals from the grain. Then they add back the vitamins and minerals in a technique called enrichment. But it still lacks the important fiber that helps with weight and blood sugars. So, what are the foods that we're talking about? The refined or enriched grains are plain pasta, white rice, the refined or enriched bread, and some cereals. And then we have the foods made with refined flours and added sugars, a double bad dose of carbohydrate choices. The difference in health effects between refined and whole grains is staggering. Although not everything on this graphic are proven, there is a tremendous amount of research to support the long-term problems with eating refined or enriched grains. What it boils down to is eating more whole, unadulterated foods. The less processing, the better they are for health. When reading labels, look for the added sugars on the nutrition label and the type of flour in the ingredient list. You want to look for whole grain flour and limit or avoid enriched flours. Limit added sugars as much as possible. Thank you for staying with me until the end. It can be a complicated subject, but I hope you learned something new to help you on your journey to better health.